Drinking the Kool-Aid has become an idiom for blindly following someone or something. But what happens when the Kool-Aid that's being peddled has long since passed its due date? We'll discuss that next on the Constitution Study.
There's one thing you have to know wherever you make your stand. Came from a long through line of everyday Americans.
Hello there, everyday Americans. Paul Engel here with the Constitution Study, where we read and study the Constitution and we teach the rising generation to be free. I am glad you could join me today. As always, I'm going to point you to that website, constitutionstudy.com. That's where you'll find everything Constitution Study, everything I'm working on, every place I'm going to be speaking, every place you can find me on the web. It's all there. It's where you can contact me. It's where you can ask me questions. It's where you can invite me to come speak to one of your groups. Everything is there. It's also where you can suggest topics you'd like me to cover here on the Constitution Study. It's been quite busy here at the Constitution Study. January is busy. February is going to be even more busy, but I'm having a lot of fun. So keep looking at the website. Sign up for the newsletter. Find out what is going on, because there's some exciting announcements. Hopefully will be coming out very soon with the Constitution Study. With that, let's talk about this Kool-Aid I've been talking about. See, while following a couple of my regular news feeds, I came across the following headline. Quote, Virginia becomes the 38th state to pass Equal Rights Amendment. That's from U.S. News. So this intrigued me, so I read a little farther. Going on, it says, Virginia's legislature on Wednesday approved the Equal Rights Amendment, becoming the 38th state to do so and propelling the measure past the threshold required for inclusion in the U.S. Constitution. Now, this prompted me to do some more research, and while doing so, I found several examples of media reporting on the subject. Quote, on January 15th, Virginia became the 38th state to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment, crossing the 3/4 of the Union threshold specified in the Constitution for its adoption. Or this, quote, after nearly 4 decades of tumult and setbacks, the long-dormant Equal Rights Amendment may finally be added to the United States Constitution, an event that hinged on politicians in Virginia. Now, altogether, these are just 3 of the articles I found while I was researching Virginia's vote to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. Now, what do all of these examples, these headlines, and these paragraphs, what do they have in common? Well, they either ignore or they minimize the fact that the ERA is no longer up for ratification as an amendment to the Constitution. There was a lot of talk about the vote in Virginia's legislature putting the ERA over the threshold for ratification and inclusion in the Constitution. Now, while many people cheered this historic event, few mentioned the fact that the vote was totally moot. Like many of the latter amendments to the Constitution, this proposal from Congress had a time limit for ratification. Now, unfortunately for those who support the amendment, the time had expired long ago. From the resolution, quote, resolved by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, 2/3 of each house concurring therein, that the following article is proposed as an amendment to the Constitution of the United States, which shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of the Constitution when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states within 7 years from the date of its submission by Congress. See, House Joint Resolution 208, the resolution proposing the Equal Rights Amendment, was agreed to by both houses of Congress and sent to the states back in March 1972. Now, the language of the proposed amendment was very specific, quote, which shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of the Constitution when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states within 7 years from the date of its submission by the Congress. So a little bit of basic math means that the time limit for states to ratify the amendment was March 1979. Now, as the deadline approached with insufficient states for ratification, Congress took the unprecedented act of extending the deadline until June 30th, 1982. That deadline had dubious legal basis, you see, since only a simple majority of the 2 houses passed the amendment to the Constitution, not the 2/3 to propose an amendment to the Constitution required by Article 5. The Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution. Now, Virginia is not the only state to ratify a dead amendment. Nevada did in 2017 and Illinois in 2018. So we had an amendment to the Constitution proposed to the states, and when insufficient states ratified it, the Congress then illegally extended the deadline with insufficient votes. And even though the extended deadline for ratification expired over 37 years ago, we have people hyping the fact that Virginia has put the amendment, quote, over the top for inclusion in the Constitution. Of course, also lost and buried in most of the hoopla about Virginia being the 38th state to ratify the ERA is the fact that 5 of those states have voted to rescind their ratification. So technically, only 33 states currently have legislation to ratify the amendment. Why all this hype for a state voting on an amendment which has not been valid for decades? Well, as I wrote in my article, if you don't get your way, just change the rules, has become standard procedure for some in politics when they don't get the win they want, well, to simply change the rules. Now, while this is nothing new, it has become more and more prevalent in society today, much to the demise of civil discord and the rule of law. See, there are some people who so support the Equal Rights Amendment and they believe so strongly in the rightness of their position that the ends justify the means. They are willing to do almost anything to see this amendment passed by hook or by crook. This hype is also meant to manipulate you. If you can be convinced that the amendment has been properly ratified, even though it hasn't, so you are more likely to push for its inclusion, even though it's not legally ratified. And of course, if public opinion can be swayed, then pressure will be put on the courts to force inclusion of this dead amendment into the Constitution. Alabama, Louisiana, and South Dakota have already filed a lawsuit in federal court to block the ERA from the Constitution on the grounds that it was not ratified before the deadline. In fact, I found a November 12th article from the Virginia Mercury that stated, quote, Virginia is almost certain to become the 38th and final state to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment when the General Assembly convenes in January. What happens after that, however, is unclear, and experts on all sides of the debate say the only certainty is a complex legal battle that might never be resolved. Why is the future of an expired proposed amendment unclear? Because of our ignorance of the Constitution and the amendment process. Continuing from the Virginia Mercury article, it, being the ERA, was widely understood to be dead until the mid-1990s when the 27th Amendment was ratified, an uncontroversial measure dealing with congressional pay that had first been proposed in 1789 by James Madison. ERA supporters argued that the 200-year gap between its proposal and final ratification means the ERA is still valid. Now, as is often the case, the best lies contain a little bit of truth. Yes, the Second Amendment that was proposed to the Constitution was submitted to the states in 1789 as part of the Bill of Rights, but it was not ratified until 1992. Conveniently left out of the story, though, is the fact that this proposed amendment did not include a deadline. Quote, Article the 2nd, no law varying the compensation for the services of senators and representatives shall take effect until an election of representatives shall have intervened. See, just like a magician that directs your attention to the one hand while completing the trick in the other hand, those promoting the inclusion of the ERA based on the recent vote in Virginia are pointing to one hand while playing tricks with the other. No, 38 states have not ratified this amendment, only 33. No, the amendment cannot be included in the Constitution because the time frame the drafters of the amendment placed on ratification has expired. The people who wrote the amendment put this deadline in place. And the only complex legal question is how to get around the plain reading of the law and the amendment to get what some people want. So ask yourself, does the rule of law matter anymore? Can certain people get what they want even if it violates the law? Should the courts be manipulated to achieve a political end? I originally titled this episode, Lies, Darn Lies in the Media, because of the blatant attempt to manipulate rather than report. Yes, I want a free press, which means they can publish pretty much whatever they want as long as they do not infringe on the rights of another. But the American people need to remember the adage, caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. The media is not an altruistic entity. It is a business. You are buying information from them. If what you get is often spoiled, rotten, or just plain mislabeled, why do you trust what you get from them? And now that you know how the magicians do their tricks, will you be fooled by them yet again? So what do you think? Now, whether you think the ERA should or should not have been included in the Constitution, are you allowed to break the rules to get what you want? Are you allowed to ignore the very language of the amendment people are trying to get included because they want it? Forget whether you think the ERA is a good amendment or bad. Do rules matter anymore? Because if the deadline in the legislation doesn't matter, well, then what does? If the actual ink on paper, the words in the amendment don't matter, what happens when that becomes a part of the Constitution? Does it still not matter? See, that's the basis of what's going on here. There are people trying to trick you into believing the ERA has passed, that it is ready to be included in the Constitution because it has been ratified by the states. That is false. It is not true. The ERA is dead. Now, if they want to propose a new amendment, call it the Equal Rights Amendment, even include exactly the same language, Congress is more than welcome to do so. But they haven't. And they haven't done it for over 30 years. We're approaching 40 years. Why do we let these people get away with these games? And why do you trust people that so blatantly lie to you? This is not a misstep. This is not a, oops, I got something wrong. These are blatant lies. Now, whether they're lies because these people are ignorant or lies because they're devious, it doesn't matter. ERA is dead. If you want the Equal Rights Amendment, get Congress to propose a new one, or get the states to have a convention and have it proposed there. But the biggest problem we have in America is we ignore the law when it's inconvenient. We ignore the rules when it's inconvenient. We want what we want by hook or by crook, and we're going to get it. And that is part of us tearing this country apart, because we can't disagree if the rules don't matter, if the rules aren't applied the same to everybody. So take what you've learned here, share it, tweet it, put it on Facebook. Let everybody know that all this hoopla about the ERA is nonsense. It's magicians having you look over here while they're playing games down over here. Head over to the website, constitutionstudy.com, find more information. I'll put a link to the article I mentioned here in there so you can read that or watch the video as well. Most of all, let's not be fooled anymore. Let's realize that the people who are supposed to be educating us are doing a lousy job at it, and let's do it for ourselves. Head over to the website, learn more, study more, share more, and if you like this type of material, I hope to see you again the next time on the Constitution
You
Study.
have to know wherever you make your stand. Came from a long